Now let's talk about some of the settings that you can manipulate on each individual virtual machine. And since this is a quick start, I don't have time here to go into a whole lot of detail on these. But notice as I click on the machines, I can see the settings change over here. And so for example, on my XP ISO machine, what I've got is I can see the video memory that's allotted to this machine. I can see the hard disk that I'm using, the name of the hard disk. I can see here that I've also attached this ISO to it. A lot of things I can see, my network, any serial ports, and so forth. What I want you to know is that I can change a lot of these settings. Notice if I go up here to settings, then this is going to let me make changes to this particular Windows ISO. And notice I can make changes to the system. I can change how much memory has been applied to it or allocated for it. I can give it more memory if it's running slow. If I want to make changes to the processor, if I have multiple processors in the box, I can pull it up to add them. Notice you've assigned more than one virtual CPU to this VM, and it won't work unless it's also enabled, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to go too deep there. And then we can turn on acceleration. Occasionally you'll have some weird problems, and by turning these on and off, you can correct them. On display, how much video memory do we provide to this virtual machine? For the most part, this is usually okay, leave it alone. But as you see, you can add more display memory for this virtual machine. Storage, we can work with our disk drives. And if you mouse over this, it will show you the location, and I can change the disk drive if I like. Differencing disk, you can go read about those in the help files if you would like. Audio, it detected this on the setup. If it didn't, you can go work with that. Networking, notice I can tell this particular virtual machine to basically do NAT, which will allow it to use the host network adapter to be able to get out to the internet or to other machines. And notice I can set 4 different adapters here. And notice I can do a bridged adapter, and this will make calls to the network adapter that's in my host machine, and then I can get to the internet from inside my host machine here. Or I can do internal network. Now if I do internal network, this will only allow me to set up network communications with other virtual machines running on my host system. Okay, and then host only adapter. This will let me connect to the adapter on the host, and each of these gives you a little bit different functionality. We won't go into all that right now, we don't have the time, but we can access serial ports on the host, and we can actually access USB ports on the host. Shared folders, we'll take a look at those a little bit later on. Okay, but now what I want you to see here is that when I go into settings on this, you'll notice that I have basic, advanced, and then descriptions. And so notice on advanced, we can set the clipboard, and this is huge because we can do bidirectional, we can disable it, we can say you can copy and paste, you can read the clipboard from the host to the guest to the host, or bidirectional. And obviously what that means, if I set that on bidirectional, then I will be able to copy text from the host area out here and come paste it into the virtual machine and vice versa. Very easy to get information in and out of there. Now one thing you're going to notice, let me go ahead and start up this virtual machine. And now that this virtual machine is up, and let me let it run just a second here. You're going to notice that on this particular virtual machine, I can't change those settings while it's running. Now if I go to one that's not running, the settings lights up. But while a virtual machine is running, I can't make changes to certain settings in there. Some things I can once I get inside here. I can go to network adapters. Notice it's the same screen. I can change some of that stuff. So a lot of settings that you can do, and again, I don't want to go too deeply into those things here, and I'll just save the machine state here. But I just wanted you to know that they're out there, and the best way to get around here is to click on Help and go to Contents, and in the VirtualBox you have a pretty significant amount of assistance available to you, and I would strongly suggest you go out and read this. Now that pertains to any other virtual machine product that you're using. Get out there in the help files, read, learn about the system you're using, and again, I would try 2 or 3 different. I happen to like VirtualBox. It's done exactly what I needed. It seems to always have the right amount of functionality and performance, but again, I used Virtual PC for a long time, and I used VMware for a long time before that. So you will slide around on these things just a little bit. So that's basically how to set settings on this. And as you can see, there's a lot of things. We can take snapshots. We can do all kind of things with these machines. But I just wanted you to see what's out there, what you can do. The main things you need to know is if your virtual machine's running a little bit slow, then just come out here and click this, go into settings, and for example, jump on system, and you can start to change memory. Always more memory is better. All that sort of thing. Notice you can even set boot orders and that sort of thing here. So that's how to change settings on your virtual machine. Now, one of the things you're going to run across when you're working with a virtual machine is that from time to time you're going to need some files in the virtual machine that exist out on your host machine. In other words, you need to basically reach from the virtual machine down to the host machine's file structure and grab some information and bring it up into the virtual environment. Let's talk about how to do that. First of all, I'm on the host machine here. Notice that I came over here to my computer on the host desktop, and I'm going to double click on the C drive, and I want you to notice there is a Crestron folder here that has a manuals folder and a toolbox folder. I want to be able to access these inside my virtual machine. Well, you'll notice if I go into my computer inside my virtual machine, all I can see is the information on this virtual drive that I set up for the virtual machine. And so to access any of the folders on my host machine, I have to use what's called in the VirtualBox shared folders. Now again, shared folders exist, maybe a little different name, but they exist in a very similar fashion in Virtual PC, in VMware Player, and all the other virtualization products that are out there. They just may be implemented slightly differently, and so you'll just have to go to the help files on each one of those different environments to do this. But let me show you how to access some of those folders in VirtualBox. Down here in the very bottom of my virtual machine window, you'll notice these icons. There's a little blue folder, and this shows the activity of the shared folders. If I right-click it, you'll notice shared folders. It takes me to the shared folder menu. I'll cancel that. I can also come up here to devices. It takes me to the very same place. I could also set these up out here under settings, but I have to do that before I actually start up the virtual machine. Let me just go back to devices and choose shared folders. Now I can set up a machine folder that will stay there and always be there every time that I stop and start my virtual machine, or I can do a transient folder which will only be available during this particular session with my virtual machine. So the way I set these up is click on the little plus sign, click on the little drop down, then choose other, and you will notice that I'm now looking at my host machine's disk structure. So there they all are, and I want to go into C, and you'll notice there is that Crestron folder. So I click on it and I will say OK, and if I choose make permanent, it will make it a machine folder. If I don't choose that, it'll make it a transient folder. And of course read only says I can only read from there. I'm going to make it permanent, and I will click OK, and then click OK, and if you notice now, if I mouse over this down here, it shows that I have a shared access to the Crestron. Now it doesn't mean shared in the same sense as Microsoft networking shared. It just simply means that my guest machine has access to the host. To use this, notice if I go into my computer inside the host, I can't see it anywhere. I'm only looking at the actual virtual C drive that I created for my virtual machine. So how do I see it? Well, let's go back into my computer, and now let's go into folders and go into my network places. And if I look at the entire network, you'll see VirtualBox shared folders, and you'll see the share automatically set up, and there is my Crestron folder, and I can see this, and I can open, for example, Toolbox, and I can get in there and see what's going on. And sometimes, just like you see here, it'll take a few seconds for it to actually read it and to pull it up. But once it gets it up there, it's okay. But if I just go into the Crestron, notice I'm going to right click and create a WordPad document, and I'll just call that WordPad document MTL. And there's MTL. I just typed MTL with it highlighted. Now if I close this out, and if I go back out to my host operating system and go into Crestron, you will notice there is that MTL document that I just created. So very easy to have access to the file structures on the host machine, and this is a very easy way to bring things up into here. Notice had I dropped that into that folder, the Crestron folder out there on the host, I would have been able to come here and actually open that file up and see what's going on with it. Very easy way to kind of push files and information and folders back and forth between your virtual machine and your host machine. And again, in VirtualBox we call them shared folders. You will see very similar things in the other products as well.